Hi, I'm Russ Isabella, and I teach a sports photography class for the Brian Peterson School of Photography. And I am going to offer critiques for 5 images that have been submitted for critiquing purposes. And I'm going to start with this photo by Stewart, which he describes as a photo of a juvenile common frog he found in his back garden while doing some renovation work. Brought it into his mini macro studio, set up for some attempts at more abstract portrait shots, and shot it with a Canon EOS 1D3 and a Sigma 105mm macro at f11 with a touch of flash on the front. And Stuart, I'll say I like the photo. I think it's kind of a cool image. I'm impressed that the frog was as cooperative as it appears to have been for you. I don't know what would qualify this as an abstract portrait because it seems like a straightforward portrait, even if it is of a frog. And I like the effect of the flash. I like the prominence of the frog's eye. I mean, I think it's a cool photo, and setting it atop a camera lens is kind of an interesting idea. I think it would be fun to play around with the light source coming from different directions just to see what other kinds of effects you could get. But overall, I think you've done a nice job with this, and you didn't indicate how happy you were or unhappy with this particular photo in terms of what you might have been striving for. But I think, yeah, I think it's a cool shot. So thank you for sharing it. This next photo was submitted by Beatriz and is entitled Blue and Orange, and that's pretty much all the information that we have. And I personally don't have much to offer in the way of a critique for this because I view this as very much an abstract photo. And obviously, blue and orange are the themes of the photo. And I guess I feel as though the more abstract the photo, the more the beauty of it is in the eye of the beholder. I think it's pretty. I think it would look great hanging on a wall. I don't know what Beatriz's intentions were with the photo, although the blue and orange, I guess, provides a clue. So yeah, I think this is a nice, colorful, abstract photo that grabs my attention, gives me a lot to think about, and I might have liked to know a little more about what the photographer had in mind. But thank you for sending us this photo for critique. This photo was submitted by Joseph, who wrote that he'd been practicing his panning technique, trying to get a sharp image of the bike and rider, but showing the fast-paced motion of the bikes, including a motion blur of the background and the spinning wheels and tires. Joseph continues with, he thinks he succeeded this year with about 500 acceptable shots, and I didn't include that he had taken several thousand shots, this particular one being one of the ones for which he feels he succeeded at his goal of capturing a good photo with a panning technique. Shot with a 24 to 120 millimeter lens on a Nikon D7000 body at 1/125th of a second. And Joseph would love to have a critique on what he needs to do to improve an image such as this. Well, first I'll say, Joseph, that I think you did very well with achieving your goal of panning in a way that at least occasionally will give you fairly sharp focus on a feature in the image that you'd want to have sharply focused, such as the face, and in this case, the upper body of the rider. But the panning and the slow shutter speed lead to a very blurred background. The motion blur in the wheels, the spokes are uh, visible in some places, but mostly not. So, yeah, very nice job with that. And you're helped by the fact that that upper body is staying very still, I would assume, as the rider is riding. Now, if your camera was level, then this rider is riding downhill, and there's another bit of evidence to that, which is that it doesn't look like her legs are moving. That would be something that would be an added feature, I think, of a biking shot where you're panning and going for motion blurs, to have the legs, quite a bit of motion blur in the legs to add to the effect of movement. Another thought, and if you've taken thousands of photos, chances are you've already done this. But I'm thinking that it'd be fun to play with the angles. So if you were more in front of her as she was coming toward you, and still panning, what kind of an effect would that have? Like, as I said, if she was pedaling hard, I think you would have an additional bit of motion blur that would lend something of interest to the photo. I also think that a wider angle on a shot like this might maximize the effect of panning. So we see only a small portion of the background, and the bike is against that background. But if we had a significantly wider view of this, I think there'd be more of a wow factor to it as we see all this blur and see all this motion effect. So I think it did a great job. I know how difficult it is to do the panning, the very slow shutter speed, and get the portions of the image that you want relatively in focus to be in focus. So um, catch her when she's pedaling, try a wider perspective, but you certainly have the technique down on the basis of what we see in this image. Thank you for submitting it. This next image was submitted by Maria, which she describes as a picture taken with a Sony Nex 5 camera on automatic setting. She didn't have much time for photography due to family problems, hopes to come back to this spot again. Okay, so it's a beautiful spot. I can understand why you'd want to come back to it. And you've captured a lot of that beauty in the photo. I see, if I were there, some things that I probably would have wanted to do to see if I could better capture what to me are the most interesting and exciting elements of the photo, which are all pretty much back here. So the people against this backdrop of green and the incredible waterfall and the spray. So I think one of my ideas would have been to just walk along this road and get as close as I could and still be able to capture what I see as the most magnificent part of this particular scene. I appreciate the wide perspective that you have used here, and I can understand the thought that some items, some objects in the foreground might lend depth to the photo and interest to the photo. But I also think that these bushes, this bench, are at least as distracting as they are additions of interest to the photo. And so I think I would have, taken this shot and then moved in front of this bench, and as I said, tried to move closer. I also think that this particular image might be overexposed. The colors are a bit washed out for me. I think that they could be more vibrant, more saturated. The sky has no detail, and that may well be accurate, but it's also possible that we've just lost the detail because the sky is particularly overexposed. So I would think that some adjustment of exposure would bring more would bring brighter colors, would bring more detail to the image, and I think would make it pop a good deal more. Thank you for sending us this photo, Maria, and I hope you will have the opportunity to return to this spot at another time. The last photo I'll be critiquing was sent in by Suzanne, and she describes this. This is basalt stack in northwest Iceland. She took the photo at the end of July of this year. Was lucky to have falling tide, which made the green moss appear to give the picture a completely different feeling. Shot with a Nikon D4 and a 16 to 35 millimeter lens at 17 millimeters f/22, and presumably on a tripod with a shutter speed of 10 seconds. And I have to say, this is just a stunningly beautiful photo. And there are so many things about it that I like that add to the overall effect of it being a stunningly beautiful photo. For one, I'm a stickler for a relatively level horizon, which we have here, if that were not the case, that would just make it difficult for me to appreciate the rest of the photo. The foreground is used beautifully to lend direction to the photo. So we have these lines all pointing in the direction of what could be considered the main feature of the photo here. And so not only is the color beautiful, the bright green moss and the rocks are just something very different and also beautiful, sticking out of the sand, I assume it is. But the way they're arranged in the photo and the perspective from which the photo was taken and the very low angle from which the photo was taken just force the eye along these lines right to this main feature of the photo. The colors in the sky are beautiful. The exposure on this photo is perfect. We have nothing, I mean, right here, maybe it's a little bit overexposed, but it would be impossible for it to be anything other than that. Every other part of this photo is perfectly exposed. We lose detail in these shadows, but that's just the way it is. They're dark shadows. So yeah, just a wonderful job with this photo. I have to believe, Suzanne, that you thought this through very carefully and planned it very well, envisioned what you were after, went after it, and got it. So I hope you're very proud of this image because I certainly would be. And I thank you for sharing it. So that's it for my critiques. Thanks for watching, and I hope that you find them interesting and useful. Again, I am Russ Isabella, and I teach sports photography class for the Brian Peterson School of Photography.